So I saw this video the other day where someone said they kind of regretted reading One Piece because they read the manga and the pacing was good, and then they watched the anime and the pacing was very bad, and they said it kind of like ruined the experience for them, and so that they're not gonna read any more manga because they prefer to experience it through anime instead of reading it in manga. And that got me thinking, you know what, I kind of feel the same way. So like, why do I continue to read manga? I thought it was an interesting topic because I hadn't really thought about it too much, so I kind of just want to go over the pros and cons of reading manga and watching anime, and which medium you should choose personally, or if you're like me, do both. So let's go ahead and break it down. First, let's talk about what anime does better, because I think more people watch anime. So let's talk about accessibility. Most people probably started with anime. You know, you just turn on Toonami at night and there it was. And now with streaming apps, Netflix, Hulu, like they all just have a bunch of anime on them. And even they have their own streaming services such as Crunchyroll and High Dive. So basically you have the accessibility everywhere at your fingertips, anywhere you are, as long as you have a phone or some sort of TV, right? Manga is a little bit different unless you live next to a library, and even then, unless it's like a big one, they might not have a huge selection. Like my library doesn't have a big selection, or you can like chill at a Barnes and Noble's bookstore, something like that. It's a little bit, you have to go out of your way. There are free apps, but there's also some people, me included, that I just don't like reading on an electronic device. I'd prefer to flip through the pages, but if you do like reading, there are free apps that you can read stuff. However, not everyone likes that. Plus, it is honestly nice to just disconnect from technology for a little while. I will say though that manga can be super expensive. It's basically as expensive as a book, except there's like dozens and dozens of volumes, so it can be pretty expensive. Next is community. The anime community is much bigger than the manga community, and I also think there's a lot more discourse happening. Yes, there's a lot of toxic anime fans out there, but I don't think I can let that overshadow the fact that there is just a huge community, and honestly, a lot of you have probably met someone in person that watches anime, and you can talk about it, talk about the latest Juju episode, or just these hype things or twists. And honestly, that's like half the fun with manga. Like, when's the last time you met someone that's read the same book as you, unless you were like in school or in a book club? Because a lot of people just don't like to read. And then on top of that, the chances of them having read the same thing as you, it's a little bit slimmer. So yeah, I definitely think anime just wins in community there, because you can just talk about it with people. Whereas with manga people, there's just not a lot of people, especially as you get older, that enjoy reading in their free time. Which will bring me to my next point, consumability. Anime is such an easy medium to consume. You can do it while you're doing other things. You can sit back, eat a bag of chips.
I'll take a potato chip and eat it.
You can watch it alone, or you can even have like a viewing party and watch it with multiple people. So I think it's just a lot easier to consume. Manga is basically like superhero type comic books and the way the panel layouts are. Some people just don't really get into that. On top of that, it's reading right to left. So some people who aren't used to it, honestly, you just might find it weird because your whole life you've read left to right. And so reading things backwards might just not be their thing. Keeping on the subject of consumability, another thing anime does great is it just presents you with the information, which makes it so much easier to understand. You watch it, the anime just takes you through every single thing that happens, the dialogue, the action, you see it all fluidly animated. As compared to manga, a lot of times you'll come across just like incomprehensible panels, or you know, there's speech bubbles, you know, you don't know who's talking, or sometimes like action is happening and you're like, okay, wait, what just happened? You know, like who just got hit? Who just made that attack? How'd they get over the, like, you know, you have to like fill in the gaps. Basically, in the end, action scenes are just way more better watching it in the anime. I can argue the flip side a little bit, because when reading manga, you get to decide what happens between the panels, right? You can kind of give a character their own voice. It's not like an anime where, you know, there's a voice. You see comments online where like people hate the voice actor that they got for the certain character because in their head they thought it sounded a different way. So like you can give people character voices yourself, which might be nice. You can also give people like personality character traits that they might not actually have, but like when you read that character, you know, you think they might be this way. So you can give that to them in anime. It takes out all the imagination there, which for some people is nice, but other people might prefer to have a little bit more interpretation in the medium they consume. I will quickly say too, one downside to anime is I feel like you can get distracted a lot. A lot of times I'll find myself maybe like sending some text, scrolling through social media, and when doing that, you kind of like miss out 10 minutes of the anime and you just like keep watching. You're like, well, whatever. But you might miss out on details. You might miss out on this or that. You might be a little confused, but you just keep moving forward. When you're reading, you don't have that. You're like totally consumed by what you're looking at and reading because you have to focus. You can't really multitask. So that is one thing I do like about that, is that you just get like thrown into the world more. Next, we're on to stimulus. This is probably the biggest thing that anime offers, in my opinion. Obviously, you're watching anime, everything's vibrant, it's fluid, it's animated. The biggest thing too is that you get auditory cues. So for example, you get the voice acting, which is pretty cool in anime because there is just so much like screaming and yelling and passion. That I just find that very interesting because a lot of live action stuff doesn't have that. You also get like the ambient noises, right? You get, the cicadas chirping. Is that what they do? The cicadas making their noise. You got raindrops on glass. On top of that, you got a soundtrack that can really heighten your emotional state, whether it's sad, hyped, angry, it just adds so much. Audio just really elevates your experiences, makes everything just feel more alive, and unfortunately, manga just doesn't offer that same thing. And then of course we cannot forget openings and endings to anime, but that's like a whole culture on its own. I kind of mentioned this earlier as well, is that anime, is nice and colorful. Manga, for the most part, with some exceptions, is black and white. And some people just honestly might find that lacking. Maybe they want that color, and it's just not there. On top of that, again, you're looking at still panels in manga, whereas in animation, it's fluid. And a lot of anime these days are getting better and better. We look at Ufotable, just amazing studio, and they're getting really, really well at integrating 3D shots and making everything look just atmosphere. You can almost like taste the atmosphere when you look at one of their shots, even if nothing's happened. You can just like smell it. One last small thing we're gonna talk about is learning. If you're a sub-watcher of anime, you're gonna pick up some words here and there. Ohayo, nani, baka, things like that. You're just gonna like pick up on words, and it's just like a small thing, but it's kind of cool to like slightly learn a language, and you're not gonna get that in the manga. Now let's move on to what manga does better. We gotta talk about story. The source material for the story comes from the manga, so it's kind of hard to argue that an anime adaptation is going to be better with changes to the story, creatively, like all that stuff. It's kind of hard to argue that the story of an anime is going to be better than the story of the manga because it is the original content. Luckily though, anime isn't like Hollywood adaptations of stuff. They actually look at their source material, and for the most part, they stick to the story. A lot of the panels in a manga are comparable to the animation scenes, and so they do a really good job, honestly. However, there are a lot of problems with anime that people who read the manga have, as well as people who don't even read manga. The first and most notable is filler. In manga, because it's the original story, there isn't really filler, technically speaking, I guess. When you look at anime, especially shonens from way back in the day, we're talking Bleach, Naruto, there's so much filler because of how it came out weekly, and they had to like stay behind the manga and didn't want to catch up, and that's why there's a lot of pacing problems with One Piece. It's just how it was made, but there's also some where they just add filler just to add filler. A lot of people find this very annoying, especially because it has no impact on the story overall. You could argue, well, hey, it helps me get attached to the characters more because it's just real little fun adventures with the people. That's true. However, after watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I figured out that there can be significant character development with amazing pacing. So I kind of don't buy the whole like needing filler to connect to characters anymore. Anime can also take its own direction and completely deviate from the manga story. If you look at Hellsing or Full Metal Alchemist, it eventually caught up to the manga, and then it just deviated and made its own thing. And then later down the line, they remade the anime with Hellsing Ultimate, FMA Brotherhood. And while I guess this is fine, it's just kind of annoying. And then there's people who are new and maybe don't want to do the research or don't know the difference and are confused by all these different things. So it's just a lot simpler if they would just stick to the story and wait till things are more completed before they pick up projects. And in some cases, they never even do get a remake. Tokyo Ghoul or Soul Eater, it completely like goes away from the manga. The thing is, like, if you didn't read it, you would never know that. And that's kind of disappointing to know that you're like enjoying this story and it was created by somebody and then someone else kind of just like takes over and does their own thing with it. But you never know that, and so you never know what actually happens in the story that was originally created. Another thing along these lines is censorship. Anime tends to lessen a lot of stuff like blood, or they completely cut scenes out. In some cases, this might not be so bad, but in other cases, it can completely change a story or a character. For example, Zeph in One Piece. In the anime, he loses his leg from an anchor trying to save Sanji. In the manga, he cuts off his leg and eats it so that Sanji can survive on the little bit of food rations that they have. To me, this is a huge character moment, and it's completely taken away and censored, and I'm not a huge fan of it. Hopefully Wit Studio changes it in the remake, but things like that honestly kind of bug me. And if you never read the manga or anything, like, you would never know unless you did research. Also, you see a lot more boobies in manga. Next is being up to date. Obviously, the manga is the source material, so it's going to be the most current, most up to date thing there is for your favorite show. So unless the anime is completely gone through all of the manga, there's usually a little bit more manga you can read. So you can always just pick up and keep reading if you want to finish it, because, you know, sometimes you can wait years before the next season of your favorite anime comes out. You can just pick up the books and keep reading. I will say the downside of this, though, is if the manga is not completed, it's pretty much 3 months between each release. So there's nothing more annoying than waiting 3 months for a volume, reading it in an hour, and then having to wait 3 more months for the next one. Honestly, drives me crazy, but the same thing could be said about TV shows. You know, you might get more than one volume because it's a whole season, but you might have to wait 1, 2, 5, 10 years for a new season, because that's just how anime be. So pick your poison, really. Also, with manga, you do get a ending, unless you've been like reading One Piece for 20 years or something and it just hasn't concluded. There's usually an end to manga. We all know that in anime, sometimes your favorite show never just gets a second season, or Netflix cancels, you know, half the stuff they do. So sometimes you just never get to finish the story. So it honestly just kind of sucks when you're watching something like Dead Man Wonderland and you absolutely love it and you just never get that ending. Next is time consumption. Reading manga takes a lot less time than watching anime. I read some post on Reddit that someone was saying how it took them 10 days to read all of Naruto and Shippuden. There ain't no way you're doing that with the anime, okay? So it takes a lot of less time, which is nice if you're more constrained with your schedule and all that. There is the argument, however, with anime being longer, you get more time to soak in all the information and everything, whereas, you know, if you're reading a manga, you know, you might not remember something you just read because you literally spent, you know, a second reading that page, which kind of makes me feel bad because I definitely notice that sometimes I just, this dude probably took, you know, like days making this page and I just sped through it in like 3 seconds. But that is another huge point here, maybe the biggest, and that is artwork. Most people will argue that the artwork and character design in the manga is way superior to the anime. Obviously in animation, you know, there's a lot of movement, you know, you gotta like simplify the drawings a little bit. And sometimes honestly, the artwork just cannot be replicated. There's things such as Berserk, who are just pieces of art. Like, I mean, straight up masterpieces of art that you just can't quite replicate. In manga, a lot of times the shading is better, you know, the expressions are more vibrant, and that's just some limitations to animation compared to, you know, a physical drawing. But because of this, sometimes certain moments just might not be as impactful in the anime as it is in the manga. You know, sometimes these really impactful moments move too fast as well. Like there are moments where sometimes I would just sit and stare at a panel for like a minute or something, just because, like, just taking in all the emotion I'm feeling from what they've drawn, and it might just be a split second in the anime. So it's nice to be able to just sit there and just like take it all in, because sometimes one panel can just convey so much information. So in the end, what is my opinion? Which should you choose? Honestly, I think you should just look at these points here, figure out which one aligns more with what you like, and go with that. If you want to be like me and do both of these things, I would say that novelty is very important, right? So I would figure out what gives you more joy in these things. So when you experience something for the first time, like a certain twist or emotionally, you know, what's going to have a bigger impact? Reading for you, or is it going to be watching something and having all the music and the sounds and all that stuff, you know, affect you? I think whatever your answer to that is, you should start with that, then maybe wait some time, maybe forget some of the smaller details, and then go ahead and read the manga. because it'll be like rewatching a show or rereading a book. You won't quite have that same response necessarily because you already know the story and what's going to happen. But I do enjoy consuming the same story through different mediums personally. So if you're like that, go ahead and do both, honestly. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. I thought it was an interesting topic. So yeah, with that, I will see you guys all next time.